go, 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 go. That's the birthday. That's the birthday.
What is going on, Z-Pack? It's your boy Z-Dog MD, aka Dr. Zubin. I got my boy Tom Heineber and Logan Stewart on the board. What's up, what's up, what's up? What's up? Today we are memorializing the fact that 9/11 is now old enough to drive. It has been 16 years since that fateful day in September when we all remember, or those of us who are alive, remember where we were. Tom, do you remember what happened, where you were on 9/11?
Weirdly enough, I will never forget because I was getting my braces off. So I was at the orthodontist and they were yanking off my braces. And we were all watching it on the TV, the orthodontist, me, and the assistant, and they're yanking it off my teeth, and we're all just like, this is crazy. Yeah.
That is the least moving story I've ever heard about 9/11. Like, oh yeah, I remember they were pulling my teeth off.
Well, I was only 12, man. I was at the dentist.
I'll cut you some slack. You were getting your girl. I should have gotten braces and never did. I'll tell you where I was, Z-Pack. Actually, I'm going to tell the Tad Cam where I was because I like this Tad Cam. Hey there, Tad Cam. Mrs. Dog and I were residents at Stanford. And this is how it went down. We were both doing night float. I forget which rotation she was doing, but we were both on that night. And I remember coming into the call room, the team room in the morning to sign out, and people had the TV on. And they were like, did you hear what happened? Both of the Twin Towers in New York have been destroyed. And I was like, I'm sorry, come again? And then I watched the footage, and I remember sitting there in that room, seeing these planes hit the building. You see the first one, and you go, okay, that must have been, maybe it was an accident, maybe it was something else. Then you see the second one, and you realize, oh my God, they are actually attacking our country. And I remember, Tom, I had a fury, like a rage inside, because you would hear about terrorism and the stupidity of radical ideas and all the dumb crap that they do, and then you see it actually attacking your homeland and killing people in a town that's so iconic, and you're like, screw these people.
Yeah.
Melt them all into glass. That was my first reaction.
I remember I was looking at the image of the falling man today. Do you remember that image?
Yeah.
And it's a guy who was in between both towers, and he had made the decision to jump to his death rather than, surf the rubble down when the skyscrapers were going to fall or deal with the fire. And I was just like, man, can you imagine being in that position and having to make that call? You know you're going to die, and it's pick how you die.
Not that day, that week was the week where I really discovered what it meant to actually be mortal. Because up until then, I was invincible. Like in my mind, I was a young 20-something person. I had my girlfriend who ended up being Mrs. Dog. I was a doctor. I was studying, and I was never going to die. And then I saw that people just like me jumping out of a building who had no choice. And I remember it changed my thinking forever. Every day is precious. You're here for a reason. Take advantage of it. And also, terrorists suck and should all die.
Yeah.
Now, I want to, just as a piece of housekeeping, I want to let you guys know a couple things. Number one, we're live streaming to YouTube and Instagram at exactly the same time. The medical providers say, what's up, beautiful people, on Instagram. We're doing an experiment. So we're side streaming here. So if you want a different angle, you can log into YouTube or Instagram and see us from the unedited view. Where we're like, yo, what up? The second piece of housekeeping, there are about 12 million people without power today after Hurricane Irma in Florida. We want to give them a shout out. We're thinking about the frontline healthcare providers and everyone over there. Stay safe. And if you're using your precious battery power to watch our show, we're deeply grateful. Now back to 9/11. I was thinking it's the 16th anniversary of this event, and we don't want to forget the Pentagon. We don't want to forget, obviously, the Twin Towers. We don't want to forget Flight 93. And we don't want to forget the huge sacrifice made over the years intervening by our men and women in the military who had to go abroad to fight to try to keep us safe at home. And whatever your politics are, whether you think these wars were a good idea or a bad idea, we have to support the people who give up everything, and sometimes their lives or their ability to walk, or they suffer traumatic brain injuries. We have to respect their sacrifice, appreciate and support them any way we can. And I was thinking, if we're gonna go and think about, okay, what was it like on that day? Let's get voices from the front lines who are there, from our tribe, the tribe of healthcare, and see what they're saying, what they remember of that day. People who were there on the pile, who were there, right?
Not only, it should be pointed out, not only that day, but for anybody who is old enough to remember, for weeks, people were searching the rubble at Ground Zero. Lots of first responders, people that weren't even in medical or fire or police departments were helping out. And there were a lot of health consequences from that. You remember people were getting early forms of cancer and all sorts of things.
So it's interesting because there was a lot of denial on the government's part and other parts that this was a real thing, this 9/11 syndrome. But we were seeing it very, very soon after. And the main issues appeared to be respiratory issues. So this is what happens when a building, a modern office building, collapses. You release everything in those fluorescent bulbs has mercury in it. There were 400 tons of asbestos in the Twin Towers. Asbestos!
Right.
Now, we were talking to the stupid-ass vegan movie that meat is
What
a
the
class
Health.
1, What the Health, is a class 1 carcinogen. You know what's a class 1 carcinogen? Is asbestos.
Right.
So cause lung disease, lung cancer, mesothelioma, et cetera. So all of this was released into an aerosolized form that coated everybody. And when you look at pictures from that day, you see it. Now, immediately people were having these episodes where they were waking up short of breath, and since then we've seen a rise in all kinds of cancers. The government has recognized it. There's a fund that was set up to support people who are there working as frontline providers. But I wanted to go through, and we can talk more about that, we can take comments on that. I want to go through and read some comments from the front lines.
Real quick before we do that, do you remember just for probably like 2 weeks after 9/11 happened, definitely in the first 3-4 days, everybody in America was just like nice to each other.
Oh!
Like, all of America was like Mayberry.
I-
It was the weirdest thing, and there were American flags
Everywhere.
and like everybody was just being super nice and cordial.
I remember it well. In fact, I remember I went to, we had a scheduled trip to Napa, me and Mrs. Doug, because you only get a week off every now and again in residency. And there was no way that anything was going to stop us from going. We had this long drive, and all we did was listen to NPR. And I'd never listened to NPR prior to 9/11 because I thought that was for chumps. Like, you listen to Hot, 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 98.7, the greatest hits of the Bay Area. And it would be nothing but Bay Area hip hop. It would be like E40 and...
I remember.
Oh, heck yeah. Tell me when to go. And instead I was listening to NPR, and I got my learn on, and I realized, wow, we're actually deeply connected to the events of the world. We got to Napa, there were huge American flags over the wineries and everything. There was a somberness. And that period of no fly, when there were no commercial aircraft, I remember hiking in the hills around the Bay Area and just being like, wow, this is what nature is really like. You don't see chemtrails, because chemtrails. You don't hear all this noise. Everything was eerily silent. Everyone was coming together. It just goes to show you that potential is within us. It rapidly fell apart, but it was within us for a period of time. So that's our human potential, is to come together like that.
Speaking of chemtrails, you got anything to say to people that think 9/11 was fake? That's what.
Sorry, how many fingers do I have? Yeah, 9/11 was. Yeah. I'm sorry, I'm out of fingers now. Yeah, that's total bullshit. So it's disrespectful. Obviously, it's beyond disrespectful. It's sacrilegious to the people who suffered and died that day and who continue to suffer and sacrifice for the benefit of everybody else to say shit like that. So you can just burn in hell if you think that. Seriously, and I don't even believe in hell, you can burn there, and where there will be 99 anti-virgins to unpleasure you. I want to read some of the comments that were sent to me today when I gave a call out for frontline workers to kind of share with us, and they could do it anonymously. One of the anonymous comments, Logan, can you pull up the image of the woman with the mask? If we have that. There it is. So this was sent by a Z-Packer, longtime Z-Packer, and we'll leave that image up while I read her comment. She says, "Hey Z, I was down at Ground Zero as a responder at that time. I came back and wound up in the ICU for weeks. Numerous hospitalizations and on heavy-duty steroids causing avascular necrosis in like every joint. 2 years after 9/11, I'm on Social Security disability at 23 years old, had to leave school for nursing and start a new path. To this day, it doesn't feel real. It felt like I was walking around in a Disney ride or something. This day is always very hard to get through, but the one thing I'll never forget is the way our entire community came together and rallied for us and the ones who are lost. Please do not use my name if you repeat this story. I'm the one with the mask. My friend in the yellow coat in the image passed away, and the middle one has battled cancer and hopefully stays in remission. I dread the day I'm told something else is wrong. My diaphragm is paralyzed, and they aren't sure if it's related or not, along with the other respiratory issues. So again, what we see is a story from a frontline first responder, or EMS people who were there, right, covered in that dust, breathing that stuff. And not only that, but you got to not forget, you have all the medical stuff, but then you have the mental health stuff, which is also medical stuff. So the PTSD from seeing the carnage that day and the stories that people tell that never leave you. And I've heard quite a few comments to that effect. Let me read a comment live here. Ellen Strack. The no plane thing was strange. I lived under direct approach for Newark, the upper holding pattern for New York City, and it was so strange. It was quiet. Yeah, me too. I used to be able to see the planes land into SFO, and there was nothing. Let's see. Logan, pull up the image of the woman in the helicopter. So this is an iconic image that became very famous after 9/11 with the mobilization of troops that happened in Iraq and Afghanistan. And I want to read the story because Ellen Sposa Morin is a Z-Packer, and she is the woman in this picture. And she reached out after my call this morning and she said, here is my story about 9/11. This is the now iconic picture that was taken of my husband and I in June 2002 upon his return from his first deployment after 9/11. And we give credit to Getty Images and so on. It represented a new time, a new era of war, which generations had never experienced. My husband's unit shipped over to the Persian Gulf a month after 9/11 and participated in those early actions in Afghanistan. I took my commission as a Navy Reserve Nurse Corps officer on 9/9/01. Who knew? Our lives were forever changed on that day. The subsequent years were filled with more deployments, serving, taking care of our military spouses and families, and a lot of moments hoping that my husband was safe. Getting a phone call in the middle of my ICU night shift from him on a satellite phone from an undisclosed location was an amazing memory. The wars took its toll, but it also provided many incredible opportunities, and I'm so proud that we both got to serve our country. Remember, you may not like the politics, but respect those that serve and their families. Thank you for letting me tell you my story. I rarely, if ever, talk about these experiences. Thank you, Ellen, for sharing that with us. It's actually very powerful, and when I first read it, I was very moved because, again, this idea that we don't all share the same politics, we may not, but we have to support the people who sacrifice so much and understand what they're going through. Tom, any comments?
Sean says, the fire department I was part of at the time sent me and several others over to help with recovery. I was 18 years old, and it is something I will never forget. I can't even put it into words.
Yeah. Can't even put it into words.
There was a story that went viral, or a picture that went viral earlier today of a firefighter in New York City firefighter who dressed in full gear and got on the Stairmaster and climbed 110 flights to honor the people that died on that day.
Wow.
I think it was, what did we lose, 300 cops and firefighters
It was
total?
Something intolerable.
Yeah, and think about, can you imagine being one of those guys and you're running up the stairs as everyone else is running down the stairs?
Those images, you see them, those pictures of the doomed firefighters climbing those stairs. And you think about, we talk about Silent No More, and we talk about violence against healthcare providers, and we talk about the danger that we put ourselves in. That was the epitome of sacrifice, right?
Yeah.
These are people who were going square into a burning building to help people, and they lost their lives. And we never can forget that. And there's already signs that people are forgetting. My daughters were born after 9/11. They don't understand what it meant.
Well, that's why it's kind of like, people are like, oh, you're going to do a 9/11 show today? Like, haven't we all heard about 9/11? No, you have to keep it alive in memory. It was like the greatest generation had Pearl Harbor.
Right.
And that was always a big deal, and it still is. And 9/11 is sort of like our era's Pearl Harbor.
100%.
Yeah.
And you have to remember that it spawned an entire era of warfare and the changed way how we think, how we fly, how we trust each other. All those things have changed. So it had a huge continuing effect on our national psyche. I'm going to pull up a comment here and read some of these. So I don't know, is it this person said I could share their story. I'm not going to share their name. Well, I think I will. So, because she didn't say not to. Jenna Dillon. So, we left the AC on, didn't we, Logan? I love it. We need checklists, guys. You hear me, YouTube and Instagram? We need checklists, but that's okay. So Jenna Dillon says, hi ZDogg MD, my name is Jenna Dillon, and I was a 9/11 first responder. I was 20 years, it's nice and quiet now. How did we not notice that earlier? We'll get our act together. I was a 9/11 first responder when I was 20 years old and a member of the 105th AW in Newburgh, New York, an Air National Guard unit. I was activated that night, reported to the base, and a few short days later I was deployed to New York City. I spent several weeks at Ground Zero and Pier 92 where I worked with the Office of Emergency Management as part of the Joint Task Force. I was responsible for procuring and distributing supplies such as body bags, respirators, and anatomy books to aid those who were sorting through the rubble. I can remember seeing the photographs that hung on the wall of the pier every time I would enter or leave the building. I can remember the smell of the pile and feel the heat coming off it. I remember meeting a small boy who was enthralled with the fact that I was in the Air Force and wanted to know all about the cool planes I got to fly. I actually didn't fly them. That boy's father was missing. I never found out if they had found him or not. I remember trying to get downtown one night and getting stuck in traffic. When my commander and I asked why we were stuck, we were told that they had found a firefighter. I remember standing at attention and saluting as they drove his body by. I will always remember the support and encouragement of civilians as they stood on the streets with signs and American flags cheering us and other first responders on. I will always remember, lest we forget. That's a beautiful story. I mean, and again, someone who was there on the pile, witnessing this. If we lose these stories, this oral tradition, there's so much video and stuff, it doesn't do it justice to hearing people who were there, who was 20 years old.
Very true.
Yeah.
Sarah says, my friend who was an NYFD firefighter deployed to the towers died of the 9/11 sickness today.
Oh my
3 a.m.
gosh. Wow.
He rescued 16 people from the towers and helped many wounded warriors.
I'm so sorry. And again, we can't abandon people who are there helping others in that cloud and that mess that happened at that time. Another comment, I'm going to read a live one here. So sad yet courageous for the first responders. Imagine if social media is what it was now at the time. The live videos and pictures you could not even imagine. Could you imagine?
Oh, it'd be crazy.
Being on the top.
You would see so much stuff from inside the building.
Oh my God.
You would just never want to see.
You wouldn't even want to see it.
No.
And as it is, we're scarred when we see, somebody like Philando Castillo getting shot or something like that.
Can you imagine all the multiple angles of the people that were trapped above the 87th floor?
And it would have gone out live, and you never would have been able to control it, and it would have been out in the world forever.
Yeah.
And the question is
not that it should be controlled. I mean,
yeah,
if it happened today, it should be a free flow of information. But
we talk about trigger warnings and all this stuff, and we kind of joke around and we poo-poo it. But for people who have real PTSD, seeing that kind of footage can be really devastating. So you do want to say warning, this is, but if it's all over the internet, it's so hard,
I know.
Yeah.
It's crazy.
I mean, it gives me a little bit of PTSD because I was so absorbed with this idea of mortality around 9/11 that I still get a little disturbed.
There already was a lot of footage for there's not that much footage of the Hindenburg or of Pearl Harbor or of the Titanic or of any of those major events in our lifetime, but 9/11 there is a lot of footage of. I mean, you can see planes hit the buildings and
I still can't even watch that stuff. It just brings back too much anger and upsetness. But that's me because I'm a little weak that way. Here's another comment. No personal Frontline story, but I wanted to share the story of my brother who went over to Iraq soon after suffered from a brain injury due to concussions from multiple IED blasts. Nick, my brother, died on April 2015. As a result of those injuries. Never forget all our heroes. Sergeant Nicholas J. Avery, U.S. Marine Corps. So we honor your sacrifice, and thank you for sharing that. It's hard, man, because again, 9/11 is the curse that keeps on cursing. It's not like it ended that day. It continues to affect us.
Well, and then we live in a post 9/11 world where there's been 2 wars since 9/11 and all the fallout that's happened, and
it's unending.
Yeah, we have to take off our shoes at the airport.
That's the worst.
It's the worst.
I mean, thank you, terrorists.
Not
By the
me,
way,
though. I got TSA pre, so I'm good.
you guys don't even understand, like, I had to convince Tom to get TSA pre because he didn't want the government monitoring his transmissions. He gets it, we go through, and he's like, hey, this is pretty, actually, the one day we actually got pre and we flew together, it was longer line than the regular check, and he's like, see, I hate you, Z. Wasted now, the government knows about me. I'm gonna read another comment here. Remembering 9/11 staffing, the disaster at Innova Fairfax, and the heartbreak standing in the empty trauma bays as there were so few that survived. 9/12 was surreal as I drove to work at MedStar through the smoke of the still burning Pentagon, maybe 15 miles an hour on the I-395, then admitting the few Pentagon survivors transferred to the burn center. Laura, my wife, and the rest of the burn nurses were the real heroes in the months after. It changed us forever. Never forget. I don't think we will if we keep hearing stories like this that don't let us forget and remember these folks that were there at the front lines.
So just as a friend was working at the Pentagon, and on that day he had to go to another part of the building to pick up a message as the regular runner was not working. So as he neared his office, he was met by a fireball heading through a passageway toward him. The left engine of American Flight 77 plowed into his office.
Oh my gosh.
That's pretty crazy.
It's horrible. I'm going to read a YouTube comment live here. Anna Van Loon, on the other side of the United States, I was helping deliver a baby when the attack started. We were 1 hour into the recovery when she turned on the TV just to watch morning TV. Wow, could you imagine you've just given birth and you see this happen? Wow.
That'd be crazy.
Those 9/11 birthdays. Fresh Dew on YouTube. I love YouTube comments because they're so nasty. Anger and upsettedness. ZDog 2017. RIP World. RIP English.
What?
I think he's saying I don't speak good English. You shut up.
You know what?
Fresh Dew.
You know, one of the things that stands out to me about 9/11, reflecting on it all these years, is that they used our infrastructure against us to perpetrate an attack.
Yeah.
Which is pretty crazy.
Pretty crazy.
They were able to do that, and I don't think you'll be able to do that again. At least not with airplanes. I mean, it's going to be really damn
It's going to be a lot harder.
Yeah.
You know, and you just think about a dirty bomb or a nuclear bomb and the fact that, you know, the Koreans could easily got one from Russia or wherever they got it from, and how easy it is to get that nuclear material. That's terrifying to me, because that next attack that uses that,
the bigger North Korean threat is probably not them launching.
No, it's them sharing their crap.
It is them like sneaking one over the Chinese border and then it going into whoever's hands.
Yep.
You know, Muslim extremists.
Have you had kimchi? It's
gross.
practically radioactive in itself. I mean, it's dangerous. It's a weapon of minor destruction, at least on my bowels. As a New Yorker, says Xtina Pursued, which I imagine is a nom de plume, or her mom really didn't like her. Born in downtown Manhattan, this day is always especially painful for me. Thank you, Z-Dog, for remembering 9/11 and its victims in a dignified, respectful way, and for paying homage to first responders. Thank you for your comment.
Jennifer says, another point of view, my friend is a young teenage girl living in NYC. She's a devoted Muslim. She's a beautiful, kind soul. She watched people walk away from the Twin Towers covered in dust that day, and the year after, her and her family lived scared.
Yeah.
And you remember the Indian guy they
Dude,
shot at the gas station?
This pissed me off so much when this happened, because
It pissed everybody off.
They shot a Punjabi guy who's they actually don't like Muslims. They're Punjabi. It's like everyone in India, they all fight each other.
Yeah.
And you know, the Hindus hate the Muslims, hate the Punjabis, hate the Zoroastrians. Actually, everyone loves the Zoroastrians because
No, that was some
We're
of the
just dope.
biggest bullshit, because that guy got killed for looking funny and having a funny name.
Right.
Or like, you know, funny in air quotes. Like,
Right.
To whatever
well,
pieces of white trash.
And it speaks to the kind of emotional elephant reaction that people have after events like this. Like, literally, I was violently angry when I saw that happen. And
you go from shock to anger.
Right. And I'm, according to 23andMe genetic report, I'm 95% Middle Eastern by DNA.
Yeah.
And I literally want to go there and just clown punch everybody in the face, because you just get angry, right? And then later you process it and you still want to clown punch everybody in the
Well, that's why it was so easy to go to war.
It is.
Wars
It is.
we didn't really.
We really didn't, you know,
Like,
and that's, you know, now we're in this mess. But I mean, the question is, and they'd argue, well, you know, knock on wood, there hasn't been a major, massive 9/11 scale attack on the U.S.
I'm all for doing it like the Mossad did it.
Yeah,
You know,
go in
like,
silent.
Just kill everyone.
We don't know
Kill all their family. Kill everyone. Just die. Like, you know, all the dudes that perpetrated, you know,
the 72 Munich.
Yeah, Black September.
Yeah.
Those dudes are all dead.
Yeah.
right? Like the Mossad just.
I'm a fan of direct eye for eye.
Yes,
So,
me too.
yeah, you send in people to kill us, we go find you and kill you. That seems fair enough. Beyond that, killing women and children and relatives seems a little un-American to me. But what do I know? I'm a Middle Easterner. I'm going to read another comment. Is that okay, or do you have another one you want to read? Yeah. So this one's again. Please don't share my name. This is not about me. It says. I was just finishing my midnight shift in a Bronx precinct when the first tower was hit. Those of us who had not left yet pulled our uniforms back on and ran upstairs to the front desk to see what we could do. We stood by for a bit until the lieutenant got word to send everyone to the trade center. I was flipped a set of keys and we headed down the FDR. The second tower was hit while we were leaving and it had collapsed when we were just a few blocks away. We put the car off the side of the road and started to run towards One World Trade. We stopped dead when the smoke started to come at us. We dove into a shop and waited until the cloud was thin enough to breathe. We did what we could, helping people, firemen, other cops who were injured. Then we heard this god-awful sound like nothing I had ever experienced. The ground shook and we instinctively ran and hid in a store. The other tower had come down. We were covered in that white shit. The consistency was choking some of those who had breathed it in. Once we could see and breathe again, we went down to what I can only describe as a white soot-covered battlefield of destruction. We all started to dig and didn't stop for a long time. I left the site after about 3 days, showered and changed my uniform that I'd been in since it all started. Then we went on 12-hour, 12-off, 7-day-a-week schedule that lasted a few months. Some days we were sent to the pile, some days we stayed in the Bronx. I lost an academy classmate, an officer I worked with in the precinct who had gone to the emergency service unit, and several friends who were firefighters, about 10 in all. One of my best friends to this day lost over 50 friends. I don't talk about this often, not to my wife, my children, or my parents. I only speak about this to people who were there, as how on earth could anybody else truly comprehend what had happened? I share this today to hopefully bring some clarity and understanding to a generation of people who grew into adulthood after this terrible day happened. We don't ask for parades. We don't ask for medals. We don't ask for accolades. We only humbly request that people remember. Please remember the people lost that day, from the heroic firefighter walking up to the top of a burning building, to the cop pulling people out of the rubble, to the medic treating people in an extremely dangerous situation, and to the nurses and the doctors who stood by gallantly, waiting for masses of wounded who would never come. I think that is psychologically harder than what I went through. They know how bad it was before anyone else. I don't think I could say it any better than that.
I have a comment from Crystal who said, one of the most chilling noises during the search efforts were when the firefighters' breathing alarms were going off. It happens if a firefighter self-activates it to signal for help, or if a firefighter has been motionless after a period of time. Unfortunately, it was the latter. Tons of them echoing through the rubble.
Wow, wow.
Yeah.
It makes you think of the cell phones ringing
At the
Pulse nightclub.
thing, yeah.
These images of mortality is really what it is. Well, this was a real upper. It's not meant to be, guys. It's meant for us to remember with the appropriate solemnity and gravity exactly what happened 16 years ago today.
And you have to remember it, because at some point we're due for another one of these.
Yep.
Whether it's terrorist or something else, there will be another large loss of life on American soil at some point in the future.
Yeah.
Hopefully it's really far down the line, but it's going to happen. It's almost a certainty.
And one thing we know is that if and when that happens, the frontline healthcare workers, the EMS, the firefighters, the police are going to be the first on the scene, the last to leave, the ones to sacrifice, as they always are. And the least we can do is support them in times of peace and in times of conflict and disaster. So that is what I would like to leave with you guys. I want you guys to hit share on this. I want people to hear these stories. I want you to leave your stories in the comments so people never forget what happened that day. I want you to tell your young children what happened. so they understand that nothing is for granted, and that we went through this as a nation and we came out the other side, and how we pulled together and helped each other in that time. And hopefully we'll continue to do that even in times of peace.
I want to
Other
read
thoughts?
you one from David. real
Yeah.
quick. David said, Z-Dog, I was a first responder during 9/11, but I wasn't a first responder during 9/11, but I was in 29 Palms as a Marine completing desert training. I was able to take the fight to those who caused this atrocity. However, fast forward 16 years later, and I'm in PA school to bring this full circle, starting as a fighter and ending as a healer. I lost many friends, and now I have the honor to treat those who are affected by various ailments, including those who were there at ground zero. Never forget.
That's the most beautiful thing I've ever heard. I love it. Thank you, David, for sharing that with us. I don't think I can top that, so I think we're going to sign off to the YouTube folks, the Instagram folks, the Facebook folks. Thank you for making this tribe a voice to be reckoned with in the world. They will hear us, as George W. Bush stood on the pile that day and said, those guys are going to hear us now. We've been making a sound, and people are going to hear us in healthcare as we build Health 3.0. So thank you for joining us. Hit share, hit like, spread the word, tell a friend, and we are out. Stay safe.
Go, 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 go. That's the birthday. That's the birthday.